Hey everybody, Pops here. I thought I'd give you another episode of Pop's Perspective. You know, it's interesting. I had put in the community area that a couple weeks back I was going to be putting some of my paintings in an art show. I, for some reason, have arrived at the subject of wild burros, and I paint oil paintings of wild burros, and they're not bad. Anyway, I was in this art show, and I was sitting there waiting as people walked by and would look at your work and comment and whatever. And it was really interesting. There was this group of four Buddhist monks who walked by. I assume they're Buddhist monks from the way that they were dressed. And they stopped and walked into my little area and were looking at the pictures. And I just struck up a conversation and I said, hey guys, how you doing? You having a good day? And one turned to me and said, yeah, great. And they said, we really like your artwork. I said, that's awesome. And they said, are those burros local to where you are? I said, yeah, they're out in this area here. He said, I really think it's important that we protect this wildlife. And I was like, you know, I could not agree with you more. It's so true. He goes, where can I go to see them? And I said, well, I'll give you directions of where you can go to see them. And we chatted for a couple more minutes, just cordially about life and the art show and whatever. And then said goodbye and they went on their way. This past week, as I thought about that, I ran across this phrase, which I thought was really good. Engagement is not endorsement. Engagement is not endorsement. So here I am engaging, having a lovely conversation with these monks, particularly one in particular. But what does that imply? If I had this engaging conversation, does that mean that I'm now going to become a Buddhist because I had a conversation with them? I don't know if it came out that I was a Christian at all, but does that mean that they're now going to become Christians because they had a conversation with me? No. Engagement is not endorsement. And the thing that's amazing about that is you have two people, the one monk in particular who has devoted his life to his religious faith, Buddhism, right? Most important thing in his life. Arguably for me, it's the same thing. What's the most important thing in my life? It's my faith in Jesus, my Christianity, okay? And so you have two people who are entirely opposite on some level about the things that are the most important to them in life. But if I saw them and recognize, oh, those people have a different perspective on the most important thing in life, so I'm not going to talk to them. No, engagement is not endorsement, right? I can have a conversation, find out about their thoughts, find out about their faith, find out about their interest in wild animals, and they can do the same to me. Find out about my interests, find out about my, painting or whatever it is. So you can interact and engage with people who are totally different from yourself in some area, and engagement does not imply endorsement. Engagement implies, I'm trying to understand you. I'm trying to get a better handle on what your perspective might be. And maybe you'll be interested in hearing what my perspective is as well. In some of these videos, I've often talked about a dear friend of mine at the university where I work, and he and I are very, very different in our political views. But the fact of the matter is we are not going to let them get in the way. We can have engaging conversations. And can I tell you something? Through the conversations with my friend, I've kind of changed my position a little bit on some things. And he has told me the same thing. And it's kind of like when you understand other perspectives, there's a chance that it'll influence your own. Now, that necessarily the goal is not, like I say, endorsement, but at the same time, it opens your mind to other perspectives. You can see why people think the way that they do oftentimes. And you recognize that people are human, even though they're very, very different than you, potentially in their perspective. So I really encourage you, particularly in our society right now, it's kind of like, I don't want to interact with anybody who has a different perspective, particularly politically, because then that implies that I'm endorsing them. No, it doesn't at all. It implies that you're a person with an open mind, willing to talk to somebody else who has a different perspective on some issue than you. And you're willing to interact with them and engage with them. I had a similar interaction when I was at the state university. When I found out that a colleague was gay, I didn't have a lot of gay friends in my life. And I went out of my way to try to develop a relationship with that person. I wanted to understand them. I wanted to engage them. And I enjoyed those relationships that I had. And one man in particular, there was a woman too, but a man in particular became a friend of mine. And I'll never forget that he told me something that broke my heart. That he said, I was shaking his hand, saying goodbye when I left that university. And he said to me, I never thought I'd have a friend who was a Christian. And my response was, ouch, right? Christians should be engaging with gay people. Gay people should be engaging with Christians, even though we may have different perspectives on a variety of issues. I wasn't worried so much about the gay people as I was about people like myself who were Christians, and saying, someone could say they never thought they'd have a Christian friend. Man alive, is that condemning to people who have the thought process or the kind of the background or the kind of the perspective that I do on life. And I don't want that to be representative. I want to go out of my way to engage people in order to understand them and help them to understand me. But once again, remember, just because you engage somebody, just because you talk to them, does not mean that it's an endorsement of views, particularly if they're views you don't agree with. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you on the next video.